For years, Keith Urban's life looked like a straight-up perfect country ballad. Fame, fortune, a radiant wife, and that whole calm domestic bliss vibe. But behind the glimmering red carpets and those heartfelt award show shout-outs, there was silence. A heavy, loaded silence. And one day, that silence cracked wide open and showed the storm hiding underneath. Born in Whangarei, New Zealand, and raised in the suburbs of Brisbane, Keith Lionel Urban was the son of a store manager and a mom obsessed with American country records. His childhood? Not glamorous at all. A small house, a restless spirit, and a guitar that became his first and only real escape. By the day he was 10, he was already performing in local competitions, his voice raw and hungry. That hunger never left Haim. It pushed Haim across oceans to Nashville, where every young musician shows up chasing the same big dream. But Nashville ain't soft. It's a battlefield. Only the ones with scars make it out alive. Keith learned to mask his pain with charm, to hide his fears behind guitar strings. And when the world finally noticed he was already bleeding on the inside. Then came Nicole Kidman, Hollywood's golden girl, the definition of poise and perfection. When they met in 2005, the chemistry was instant, almost movie-level cinematic. To the public, it was a straight-up fairy tale. Two Aussie icons. Both gorgeous. Both looking untouched by darkness. But for Keith, it hit deeper. She was light. And he was the man who'd spent a lifetime learning how to smile through shadows. Their marriage started like a song written in heaven. But under that melody? Cracks. Keith was battling addiction, the old ghost he thought he'd buried back in his Nashville days. The night before their wedding, he admitted his fear of relapse to Nicole. She held his hands and whispered, "Then we'll fight it together." But addiction doesn't play fair. Within months, Keith spiraled again. Nicole staged an intervention. The tabloids screamed scandal. He called it salvation. "She saved my life," he later admitted. But even salvation leaves scars. Fame just amplified everything. The whispers, the slip-ups, the doubts. Keith's career shot up, but so did the rumors, jealousy, distance, emotional coldness. For years, he stayed quiet. Let people believe whatever they wanted, that he was just the lucky guy who got Nicole Kidman. But now, at 57, Keith Urban is finally talking. And what he reveals about their love, their fractures, and his silence, it hits hard. Because sometimes silence isn't peace. It's a wound waiting to sing. By the time Keith Urban hit the peak of his fame, he had mastered illusion. On stage, he was magnetic, smiling, glowing, untouchable. Off stage, in the dim light of dressing rooms and hotel corridors, he was haunted. Addiction, shame, that constant fear of not being enough. Not enough for fans. Not enough for his wife. Not enough for he himself. He always said music was his therapy. But therapy for Haim came at a price. Every redemption song, every second chance anthem, was carved out of something real. A night, he almost lost Haim himself. A moment he almost walked away. When he played to thousands, he wasn't celebrating. He was begging for forgiveness. One chord at a teammate. Nicole, on the other hand, was control personified. She had survived the emotional wreckage of her broken marriage with Tom Cruise. She rebuilt herself on discipline and poise. To her, love meant stability. To Keith, love meant survival. That difference? It became the invisible wall between them. "We were from two worlds," he admitted later. She was the calm. I was the chaos. Behind closed doors, their love was beautiful and brutal. Nights, she cried quietly while he stumbled through the door. Mornings he woke up ashamed, promising it would be different. Sometimes it was. Keith entered rehab in 2006, just months after their wedding. Painful. Necessary. A desperate move to save not just the marriage, but his soul. Nicole stood by Haim even when Hollywood whispered she deserved better, that he'd never change. But she stayed. "I married a man," she said, "not an image." That right there defined their foundation. Recovery didn't magically fix everything. Fame magnifies insecurity. Every time Nicole got an Oscar nomination or landed on Vogue, Keith felt pride and a weird stab of inadequacy. "She's so strong, so composed, and I'm just still learning to be," he once confessed. The irony? Both were locked in their own prisons. Keith trying to prove himself. Nicole trying to hold it all together. They were in love. But love alone wasn't enough. Addiction's shadow still lingered. The pressure of being the perfect couple was suffocating. So Keith put the mask back on. Every concert, every red carpet, every smile next to Nicole was a performance inside a performance. I wasn't lying, he said years later. I was surviving. Eventually, applause stopped filling the silence. After shows, once the lights dimmed, he'd sit alone in the dressing room staring at a reflection that looked whole but felt hollow. Fame had given he everything, awards, money, fans, a dream marriage, but it stole simplicity. Nicole warned him early. They'll love the version of you they create, not the real you. She wasn't wrong. The real Keith was fragile. Sometimes insecure. Sometimes resentful of the pressure. So he pulled back. Emotionally. Creatively. The distance between Haim and Nicole grew quietly. Not headline drama. Just subtle erosion. Conversations shortened. Laughter sounded rehearsed. Holding hands became routine, not need. More tea on tour. More team on film sets. Same roof. Different worlds. Still, when rumors flew, they defended each other hard. We've been through more than anyone knows, Keith said, eyes wet but steady. You don't survive love by pretending it's easy. You survive it by crawling through the fire for it. That fire? Real. And it burned. Fame made Haim forget vulnerability. Every time he grabbed the guitar, he hid behind it. Every time he stood next to Nicole, he wore armor. But deep down, he still needed saving. I used to think being strong meant not breaking down, he said. Now I know it means breaking and still finding a way to sing. In 2015, he almost quit music. Not because of performing, but because of pretending. Nicole found Haim on a balcony staring into the Nashville night. What are you thinking, she asked. That I don't know who I am without this, he said, voice shaking. She didn't preach. She just sat beside Haim, hand in his. The silence that night was heavy, but honest. Their love was contradiction, joy and pain, chaos and calm. Yet they kept choosing each other. Again and again, even when it hurt like hell. Keith started writing from fragility. Not love's victory, but its endurance. Blue ain't your color. Parallel line. The fighter. Confessions wrapped in melody. A heart broken and rebuilt too many times. But even as music healed Haim, it reminded Haim of what he'd sacrificed. Endless tours. Birthdays missed. Mornings without his daughters. Quiet dinners that never happened. Sometimes I wonder if the price of my dream was too high, he admitted in a documentary. You chase the spotlight, and when you stand in it, you realize it blinds you. Nicole once said loving Keith was like holding fire. Beautiful, but it burned. They learned to live with the burn. As they aged, something softened. The need to prove faded. In its place, gentleness. Love that didn't roar, it stayed. In their Nashville home, away from flashing cameras, Keith found peace in simple things. Morning coffee. Watching their daughters grow. Writing songs nobody might hear. I used to think success was being everywhere, he said. Now it's being fully present, even in one quiet moment. When the music fades, truth stays. And for Keith Urban, that truth wasn't tragedy. It was transformation. The boy who ran from pain faced it. The man who feared silence lived inside it. The husband who chased perfection learned that being real was enough. Still, the world kept poking. Headlines. Rumors. Questions about the marriage. Keith just smiled. Let them wonder. I'm done performing for anyone but her. At 57, he embraced stillness. Quiet mornings. Slow songs. Wind instead of applause. For the first tea, he wasn't chasing anything. He was just living. By the time Keith Urban turned 57, he wasn't that restless kid grinding through Nashville bars anymore. He was a survivor. Awards on shelves. Anthems in history. And in his eyes, the knowledge of what it costs to keep your soul when fame keeps trying to sell it. Redemption always ran under his story. Every win carried a shadow. Addiction wasn't just past tense. It was a ghost whispering peace is temporary. You never really beat it, he said. You just keep choosing not to lose. And he chose. Every day, Nicole stayed his anchor and his mirror. She saw he at his worst and believed anyway. Loving a recovering addict meant walking a tightrope, support on one side, exhaustion on the other. Some days she wanted to hold he. Some days she wanted to run. But she stayed. Because under the wreckage was still the man who could make her laugh like nobody else. The man who once sang to her under a Tennessee sky when no cameras were around. Redemption in Hollywood cost something. To rebuild, Keith stripped away everything fake. Charts. PR games. Industry hype. He stopped chasing numbers, and started chasing truth. His songs turned into straight-up confessions. No polish, no perfection, just raw and painfully human. God whispered your name. Wild hearts we were. Every track hit like a love letter to imperfection, to the messy beauty of falling flat and getting back up anyway. But even though he was trying to live honest, the world kept testing him. There were whispers about relapse, rumors of tension in the marriage, headlines hinting at some quiet separation. Keith didn't clap back. He'd learned the hard way that defending yourself in public can wreck your peace in private. People believe whatever fits their own storyline. He said, you can't control that. All you can do is live your truth loud enough that the noise fades. Still, redemption wasn't just about surviving. It was about forgiveness. And for Keith, the hardest person to forgive was himself. He had hurt people. He had disappointed the ones who believed in him. He had wasted years chasing applause when what he really needed was silence. The healing process? Brutal. Therapy sessions. Breakdowns. Endless nights facing memories he'd buried under fame. The hardest part of recovery isn't quitting the substance, he admitted. It's facing the person you were when you used it. Nicole, in her quiet way, taught him that brokenness didn't disqualify him from love. It actually made him more capable of it. She once told a friend, Keith doesn't realize it, but every time he gets up and performs, he's teaching people how to begin again. That became his unspoken mission, to turn his pain into proof that redemption is possible. So when he sang, it wasn't about the notes anymore. It was about the space between them, the silence holding everything he'd survived. Fans felt it. There was a weight to his performances that hadn't been there before. He didn't need to impress anyone. He just needed to connect. But even as he grew spiritually, the pressure of being Keith Urban was still there. Every tour, every interview, every photo shoot meant putting the persona back on. The polished, smiling, grateful star. It wasn't fake, just incomplete. Behind that smile was a man who still woke up some mornings wondering if he deserved the life he had. So many times I look at Nicole, he said softly backstage once, and I think, how did I get this lucky? But it wasn't luck. It was grace. That was his redemption. Not fame, not money, not even forgiveness from others. Just the quiet grace of being loved despite his flaws. And that grace didn't just come from Nicole. It came from his daughters. Sunday and Faith became his compass. Through them, he rediscovered the innocence he'd lost somewhere between his first record deal and his first rehab stay. Watching them laugh brought him back to the little boy in Brisbane who picked up a guitar because he wanted to make people feel something real. Fatherhood changed him in ways music never could. It gave him perspective. The applause would fade. The lights would dim. But love would stay, if he learned how to protect it. He started choosing home over headlines. Swapping world tours for school recitals. Late-night parties for bedtime stories. I don't want to miss the moments that matter, he said. I've already missed too many. Redemption for Keith Urban wasn't some big, cinematic comeback. It was a lifelong surrender. Surrendering ego. Surrendering fear. Letting go of the need to control the narrative. And in that surrender, he found a different kind of fame. One measured not in awards, but in peace. There's a photo of him and Nicole in their Nashville backyard. Barefoot. Laughing. No makeup. No spotlight. To most people, it's just another candid shot. But to Keith, it's proof of a miracle, that after everything, love still chose to stay. He once reflected, I thought redemption was about getting back what you lost. Now I know it's about being grateful for what you still have. That's why his story hits. Not because he's perfect, but because he's painfully, beautifully human. A man who fell 1,000 times and kept getting up. Not for fame, not for pride, but for the people who never gave up on him. When he walks on stage now, he doesn't see strangers. He sees witnesses, people, like him, just trying to find their way home. There comes a point in every long love story when survival becomes the truest kind of romance. For Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman, that moment didn't show up under award show lights. It came in the quiet after years of fighting, not each other, but the world, their wounds, the ghosts of their pasts. By the time he turned 57, their love had shed the glitter and grown into something raw, quieter, realer. Hollywood had its version, the flawless actress and her redeemed country star husband smiling on red carpets. But the truth? Way more layered. Their marriage was alive. Sometimes glowing. Sometimes fragile. Always honest. Nicole once said, People think our love story is perfect. It's not. It's just real. And real means it's been broken and mended more than once. For Keith, love after redemption wasn't about grand gestures anymore. It was about showing up, even when the applause stopped, even when the days felt heavy. Nicole taught me how to stay, he admitted. I used to run from everything, pain, confrontation, my own feelings. She showed me love isn't running. It's standing still and facing the storm together. That storm wasn't just emotional. It was spiritual. After addiction, guilt, and shame, his biggest battle was with himself. Sobriety gave him clarity, but it also stripped away the noise that used to numb him. The silence was uncomfortable. When you're sober, you feel everything, he said. The good, the bad, the guilt, all of it. There's no escape. That's when you learn who you really are. Nicole saw him stripped down, vulnerable, shaking, and she stayed. She didn't try to fix him. She just loved him in the spaces between his scars. That was the quiet revolution of their marriage. He didn't need saving. He needed acceptance. And through her, he found it. Their Nashville home became a sanctuary, not of luxury, but of simplicity. Morning routines instead of red carpets. Cooking breakfast together. Long walks. Bedtime stories. Music drifting from the porch. We live an ordinary life, Nicole said. And that's the extraordinary part. He started writing again, not for charts, but for himself. The Wild Night anthems faded. In their place came songs about gratitude, forgiveness, and love that survives the wreckage. Every lyric felt like a confession. Peace had its tests, though. Distance crept in when filming schedules and tours pulled them apart. But this time, they chose honesty over silence. Late-night calls. Quick flights. Love notes tucked into suitcases. The little things that hold everything together. The first half of my life was about chasing everything, Keith once said. The second half is about keeping what matters. That shift changed him. Success wasn't awards anymore. It was whether his daughters felt loved, whether Nicole felt seen, whether he could end the day with a song still in his heart. But love after survival? It's not soft. It's fierce. It demands humility and the guts to forgive who you used to be. He used to fear his past. Now he saw it as the foundation of who he became. I wouldn't wish my mistakes on anyone, he said. But I wouldn't erase them either. They led me here. To her. To my family. To peace. Nicole found in him something rare. Vulnerability without performance. After years of Hollywood scripts defining her, she found someone who saw her as a woman craving normalcy. He makes me feel human, she once said. And in this business, that's rare. Friends who visited their Nashville home described it as calm. No chaos. Just laughter. Kids' drawings on the walls. Music humming softly. They've built something sacred, one friend said. It's not about fame anymore. It's about peace. Still, there were nights he'd wake from old nightmares, drugs, loneliness, fear creeping back. But this time, he wasn't alone. Nicole would grab his hand and whisper, "You're here. You're safe." Those words grounded him. He never pretended marriage was easy. It's work, he said. It's forgiveness. It's showing up even when you don't feel like singing the song. But when he looked at her, you could tell. He still heard the music. As the years passed, he slowed down on purpose. Mentored younger artists. Talked openly about recovery and mental health. I spent years chasing approval, he told the crowd. But the only approval that matters is the one you give yourself in the mirror. That mirror once showed a man drowning. Now it reflected a survivor. Not perfect. Just whole. Not loud. Just at peace. Love in the aftermath, he learned, isn't about erasing the past. It's about carrying it gently, letting it remind you how far you've come. Every scar, every wrinkle, every song, proof of a life fully lived. When asked what he learned most, he smiled. Love isn't the reward for surviving. It's the reason you do. At 57, Keith Urban wasn't winding down. He was waking up. The fire of fame once warmed him and nearly burned him out. Now he didn't crave applause. He craved grace. And grace showed up in small, quiet moments only a steady heart would catch. His voice carried survival now. The arenas felt different. He loved the intimate shows where he could see every tear. When you've lived long enough, he told one crowd, you realize the loudest truths are whispered. The headlines still came. Gossip still swirled. But he didn't feel the need to defend his story anymore. He'd learned something simple, something solid. Peace doesn't argue. It just lives. He had learned that love wasn't something the whole world needed to get. It wasn't meant to be analyzed or picked apart. It was meant to be lived, just by the two people carrying it. They see the smiles, he told a friend. But they'll never understand the nights we cried, the mornings we forgave, the prayers we whispered in silence. Nicole's world kept spinning too. The film sets, the awards, the constant reinvention of a woman the world just couldn't stop watching. But behind closed doors, she had changed as well. The years humbled her, softened her, pulled her closer to faith, to family, to the rare kind of peace they had built together brick by brick. The woman once trapped in Hollywood's version of perfection now found joy in the imperfections, in burnt toast, messy hair, mornings in pajamas with their girls, and Keith strumming softly by the window. And yet both of them knew love, even a love as deep as theirs, wasn't immune to time. It shifts. It stretches. Sometimes it fades in certain light and burns brighter in others. There were moments when distance felt inevitable, when silence sat heavy between them at dinner, when words failed. But every single time, one of them found a way back. So many times through laughter. So many times through tears. So many times through the music. During one of those quiet seasons, Keith wrote a song he would never release. A private piece, just for her. The lyrics were simple. If I go before you do, remember the song was always you. Nicole cried when she heard it. Why would you write something so sad, she asked. He smiled. Because someday one of us will have to learn how to live without the other. It wasn't morbid. It was just real. The kind of truth only people who've survived loss truly understand. The long goodbye had already started, not as separation, but as acceptance. They weren't trying to cling to the past or outrun the future anymore. They were learning to live in the in-between. I used to fear endings, Keith said in a podcast interview. Now I see them as reminders that something beautiful happened. As his daughters grew older, his heart expanded in ways fame never could. Sunday and Faith carried their mother's calm and their father's creative fire. He watched them with awe, knowing his greatest legacy wasn't his songs. It was them. He once told a friend, I don't want my girls to remember me as a star. I want them to remember me as a man who loved their mother and never stopped trying to be better. Nicole found comfort in watching Keith change, from a tortured soul into a man finally at peace. He's not the same person I married, she said once. He's better, and I'm better for having loved him. That was the truest testimony of their story. Not perfection, evolution. By then, Keith had deliberately slowed his career. He turned down massive world tours, choosing smaller venues and collaborations with emerging artists. He often told them, don't chase the light. Learn to live in it. His songs began to sound like reflections of love, loss, grace, and everything in between. No bitterness, just gratitude. I used to think the end of the road was something to fear, he said during one performance. But now I see it's just another beginning. You just walk it slower, with more heart. In private moments, he often returned to the balcony where he once sat years ago, drowning in doubt. Now, instead of staring into darkness, he watched the sunrise. The long goodbye, he wrote in his journal, isn't about death or distance. It's about learning to say thank you for every moment, even the painful ones. There's something hauntingly beautiful about a man who's made peace with his past and his fragility. Keith Urban, the boy who chased music across oceans, the man who almost lost everything, had finally found what he'd been searching for, stillness. And in that stillness, love didn't disappear. It deepened. He once said, I used to think love was a song you sang together. Now I know it's a silence you can share without fear. The long goodbye wasn't the end of Keith and Nicole's story. It was the continuation, quieter, slower, more tender. A love not built for cameras, but for the soul. And as he looked toward the years ahead, Keith didn't see tragedy anymore. He saw grace in every scar, music in every silence, peace in every goodbye. He often ended his shows with one simple line, his voice shaking but strong. Thank you for listening. Not to me, but to the life between the songs. When the curtain fell and the lights faded and the world moved on, somewhere in their Nashville home, Keith Urban still played softly into the night. A melody of love that didn't end when the music stopped. There's a certain silence that comes when a man finally makes peace with himself. Not the silence of loneliness, but of completion. For Keith Urban, That silence became the symphony of his later years. At 57, he no longer chased charts or headlines. Nah, he was done with that hustle. What he chased was meaning. What he sought was legacy. And legacy, he knew, wasn't made of trophies or applause. It was carved into the hearts he touched, the people he lifted through his music, the family that loved him through every storm. His life, once chaos on full blast, had turned into something sacred, a slow-burning fire that no longer consumed, but warmed. Late at night, he would walk barefoot through his Nashville studio, guitar in hand, surrounded by instruments that had seen him at his lowest and his highest. On the wall hung photos, a timeline of the man he'd been. Keith at 20, hungry and defiant. Keith at 30, radiant and broken. Keith at 40, in love and in crisis. And now Keith at 57, calm, silver-haired, eyes still bright, but quieter somehow. Every version of me, he once whispered to a journalist, was just trying to find this one. The legacy he wanted to leave wasn't perfection. It was permission. Permission to fall. Permission to heal. Permission to start over. His songs, once charged with energy and yearning, grew softer, more introspective. They weren't about the thrill of love anymore. They were about its endurance. Not the chase for fame, but the peace that comes after surrender. Nicole often said his music grew wiser as he did. He doesn't sing to impress anymore, she told a friend. He sings to connect. And that connection, to his audience, to his family, to himself, became his greatest masterpiece. In recent years, Keith began mentoring young artists fighting the same demons he once faced. He sat with them not like a celebrity, but like a survivor. The industry will try to make you forget who you are, he'd say. Don't let it. The music doesn't come from fame. It comes from the scars. They listened, not because he was famous, but because he had the receipts. He'd been through it. He'd bled there. And he clawed his way back. Still, he stayed honest about his fragility. Some days I wake up and feel the weight, he admitted. The fear never disappears completely. You just learn how to carry it better. That humility became his quiet power, the kind no award could capture, but everyone could feel. And in that humility, he understood legacy. It wasn't what people remembered about him. It was what they discovered within themselves because of him. His relationship with Nicole entered its most peaceful chapter, no longer fueled by passion or fear, but by gratitude. They had survived everything: addiction, fame, distance, scrutiny. What remained was pure, stripped of illusion. We've stopped trying to be perfect, Nicole once said. Now we just try to be present. They spent their days quietly, morning walks through the hills, evenings by the fire, music humming softly in the background. Keith still wrote songs for her, fewer now, mostly just for her ears. One of them, titled The Fire Still Burns, carried their entire journey in one refrain. We walked through the flames, but we never turned to ash. In interviews, Keith refused to call his life tragic. It's been hard, he'd say, but not tragic. Tragedy is when you stop trying. I never did. That resilience defined him. The same fire that almost destroyed him now kept him alive. As he aged, he looked back not with regret, but reverence. Every mistake was a lesson. Every heartbreak a teacher. Every relapse a reminder that strength isn't the absence of failure. It's refusing to surrender to it. I think the greatest song I ever wrote, he once said, was The Life I Lived. When asked what he hoped people would remember, he paused. I hope they remember that I tried to love honestly, that I fought for my peace, that I didn't let my pain define me. In the years that followed, he slowly stepped away from the spotlight. Less recording, rare performances, more time with family, and the quiet rhythm of ordinary life. To some it looked like a fade out. To him, it was the strongest ending he could write. A man walking away not because he was broken, but because he was whole. On his final tour, the last song of the night wasn't a hit. It was a soft new ballad called Light After Fire. The stage was dark except for one spotlight. He stood there, guitar in hand, voice steady, carrying the ache of someone who had lived fully and loved even more. When he sang the last line, "If this is the end, then it's a beautiful one," the crowd went silent. No cheers, no applause, just stillness. Then slowly they rose, not clapping for the star, but honoring the man. Backstage, Nicole hugged him, eyes wet but smiling. "You did it," she whispered. He shook his head gently. "No," he said. "We did. The legacy of Keith Urban isn't about fame or tragedy. It's about endurance. A man who walked through fire and came out not unscarred, but unbroken. His music will outlive him, sure. But more than that, his journey, from addiction to faith, from chaos to calm, from silence to song, will remain a map for anyone who's ever lost themselves and fought like hell to come home. In the end, Keith Urban didn't just survive the fire. He became it, fierce, cleansing, eternal.